Well, friends, good afternoon to all of you. Friends, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome and introduce our uh, former professor, Department of Education and Education Management at NITR Chandigarh, and my senior colleague, Professor P.K. Tulsi, who got retired from NITR Chandigarh after putting in more than 34 years of service. She retired in March 2020, and Dr. P.K. Tulsi joined NITTT at Chandigarh in 86. Professor P.K. Tulsi is a very renowned personality in the field of education and education management. She has coordinated large number of short-term program, more than 600 training program during her tenure at this institute. And she is basically MA Psychology, MA Economics. She has done MEd, PhD in education, and she also obtained postgraduate diploma in guidance and counseling. And her areas of expertise include educational technology, educational management, research, methodology, measurement and evaluation. And she has uh, held various positions while working in this institute, like head of the Department of Education and Education Management for about 11 years, Dean Research and Development for three years, and she has also acted as director for about 8 to 9 months. Professor Tulsi uh, uh, has been teaching courses in
That's good
human
enough.
resource development, research methodology, education technology, and so on. She has guided more than 30 MTech engineering adjunct thesis, and has also guided two PhD dissertations. She has contributed two chapters in two books, and 81 papers are to her credit. She has chaired number of national and international conferences as a keynote speaker and as a chairperson in various sessions. She has attended and presented papers in various international
Let's hold
conferences
on.
held in Israel, Athens, Estonia, Thailand, USA, Abu Dhabi, Spain, and many more. And she has acted as a resource person in various organizations, including academic staff, college, Punjab University, colleges of education, technical universities. And now today she is with us, and she is going to take up a very important area. As I told you on the first day, that learning outcome forms the basis for writing various test items, because learning outcome gives direction to the teacher. You see, in the selection of appropriate learning experiences, and then in selection of the appropriate technique of evaluation, and then finally writing test item. So with these words, ma'am, I welcome you, and I request you to kindly interact with about 170 participants. 100 participants have registered on the NITR portal, and there are two nodal center, remote center. One is Guru Tegh Bahadur Institute of Technology, Rajouri Garden, New Delhi, where 39 participants are present, and another is the Department of Chemistry, Mulana Engineering College, Mulana University, Ambala, where 40 participants are present in one room. So over to Professor P.K. Tulsi, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Dutt, for the introduction. I think we should reduce the introduction time. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. As rightly said by Professor Dutt, learning outcomes form the basis for evaluating or assessing the student performance in theory, in practical, and so on. So, in this particular session, I'm going to focus on what are these learning outcomes, and are there different types of learning outcomes? Because most of you experienced people might be aware of these types of learning outcomes, but I'll be focusing on these and giving you some examples to enable you to write learning outcomes at various levels. So let me share the presentation with all of you, and then we can start interacting on this topic. Okay. I hope the presentation is visible. So, friends, what do we expect from any education system? The students who graduate from any system of education, they need to be competent. Now, when I say they need to be competent, that means they need to possess the requisite knowledge in that particular area of specialization, the technical skills in the respective area, and in addition to that, it is expected that students will possess the right kind of attitude and behavior. And if they are going for the employment, that is the wage employment, then some of the skills which are expected of them, today we all know that whatever reports are available, they all highlight that the graduates from the system are not possessing the right kind of mix of skill, and especially the soft skills that are required on the part of the individual. And when I say employability skill, I'm primarily referring to those which include leadership, creativity, interpersonal skills, decision making skills, ability to work in teams, and so on. And the third option, which is available to our learners after the graduate, is they can set their own ventures. And thereby, they need to possess some of the entrepreneurial skills, which may be overlapping with the employability skills also, but it requires the project management skills also. And here, you will see when there are gaps that exist. But I'm not going to focus on the gaps, but the outcome based education, which is now in vogue, that clearly indicates that, and there is a clear departure from the traditional education system, which was focusing on input, process, and output model. And the whole outcome based education system, the basis is the competence which need to be possessed by the graduates from that technical education system. And the whole system starts with specifying those competence. And we all know that All India Council for Technical Education has taken up the graduate attributes, and graduate attributes becomes the basis for deriving the program outcomes for a particular program, maybe civil, electrical, mechanical, computer science, and so on. And then the clusters of knowledge, skills, and attitude are made to identify the courses which need to be offered. So that is leading to the curricular experiences that need to be provided to the learners to enable them to achieve those competencies. And these become the basis for selecting the instructional strategies, that is, teaching learning strategies. And finally, these are aligned to the competencies which need to be possessed by the graduates. And the last component you can see is the assessment, which also need to be aligned to the competences. So in other words, when we say outcome-based education, any program, whether you talk in terms of civil, electrical, IT, or any other, is nothing but it comprises of various courses. And then courses include the topics, or prior to that, if you have divided the course into units and then the topics. But when it comes to the outcomes, then we need to look into that program outcomes. In terms of assessment, we need to ensure that whatever we teach in the classroom, those lesson level outcomes are first attained or achieved by the learners. Once these lesson level outcomes are attained, then we can ensure the attainment of course outcomes. And once the course outcomes for various courses are attained by the learners, then we can ensure that program outcomes will be attained. So you can see in the next slide that when it comes to specifying the outcomes, We start from program education objectives, which are the topmost, that is, what career and professional goals a student aspire to achieve after 4 to 5 years of graduation. And program outcomes refer to what are the competences which an graduate or which an alumni must demonstrate on completion of a particular program. And likewise, the course outcomes, that is what competences a learner or the alumni or the graduate need to demonstrate at the end of a particular course. And then lesson level learning outcomes, which need to be stated by us as teachers, because we are provided with POs, COs, but the lesson level outcomes or topic level outcomes or unit level outcomes, they need to be specified by the teachers themselves. So you can see we start from POs and go to lesson level outcomes. But when it comes to attainment, you can see it is a bottom up approach which starts from the lesson level outcomes and go to the program education objectives. So here I'm just sharing with you the program outcomes as they have been specified. Not here you can see program education objectives. Then you can see that it starts with different, they have simply taken up program outcomes from the graduate attributes. And the very first one is apply the knowledge of mathematics. And then you can see the next pertains to identification, formulation, review of research, and analyze complex engineering problems. And then come design and development of solution, come the conduct investigation, then modern tool usage, the engineer and the society. Again, you see these are stated for the environment and sustainability, related to ethics, then individual and teamwork and communication, and the last two, project management and finance and lifelong learning. Now, I'm sharing, you are familiar with this. I assume that you are all familiar with all these 12 graduate attributes or the program outcomes as specified for your course. And then if you look at the course outcomes, I've just picked up one example from one of the courses. That is 3 courses you can see, but I'll just refer to, say, data structures and algorithms. Now here you see the person starts with to compare the usage of linear data structures, array, linked list, stack, and queue in solving programming problems. To design the algorithms using linear data structures, and finally to use effective and efficient linear data structures in solving the given computer engineering problems, then to analyze time and space complexity for applying, and finally to use appropriate algorithmic strategy for the given programming problem. Now, when you try to compare program outcomes, course outcomes, there are a number of commonalities. All these outcomes are stated in terms of the learner's behavior. That is, what competence the learner need to demonstrate or exhibit. And you can also see that these learning outcomes are starting with an action verb. When you say apply, when you say analyze, when you say design, when you say compare, all these are nothing but action verbs. And these are the competences which need to be demonstrated by the learner at the end of a particular course or the end of a particular program. So in other words, I just skipped few things. In other words, we can simply define learning outcomes that these are statements. They are always written in the form of statement. There are many people confuse these learning outcomes as questions. They are not questions, they are statements. And they are statements that what a student is able to do at the end of unit of instruction. Now it is said end of unit of instruction. Now this unit of instruction can be a lesson, can be a topic, can be a unit, can be a course, can be a program. So when we state these statements as program outcomes, that means we are trying to specify the competences which are to be exhibited or demonstrated by the student at the end of a program. When we state these outcomes at the course level, that means the competencies student need to demonstrate at the end of a particular course. Now you see the duration. When it is program outcome, it means that after 4 years, if it's a degree program, after 3 years, if it is a diploma program, the student is going to demonstrate those. But when it comes to the course, that means if it is offered in a particular semester, then probably the time duration is 6 months, at the end of 6 months. And when you say it is a topic, the topic may take one lecture, which may be of 45 to 1 hour, or it may take 5 lectures, which you can say 5 hours. 5 hours, after 5 hours, what a student is able to demonstrate. And as I said, that these are, say for example, as a teacher, what I need to do, I need to specify learning outcomes for each lesson which I am going to deliver, or I'm going to the provide curricular experiences to my students. I must be clear what is it that is expected of this curriculum experience. And I state these when I say at the end of the lesson, a student is able to define efficiency, define programming, or compare diesel engine with petrol engine, or identify the mistakes in program written in C++, or write a program in C++. Now you can see what I have been talking. All these learning outcomes start with an action verb, that is activity verb. That is what a learner has to do and what performance the learner need to demonstrate. And these learning outcomes, when we say start with an action verb, they become specific, because defined has only one meaning, where you expect a student to give a standard definition of efficiency or programming or semiconductors and so on. Or when you say differentiate, you are expecting that a student is able to highlight the points of differences. Or when you say compare, you are expecting that student will highlight the points of similarity and differences. And then when we say write, that means you are expecting that he'll synthesize the knowledge and then create something new. Then design a staircase for 3-story residential building. Now that means these are some examples which I may talk later. But here you can see these, because they use action verb, they become specific. And any behavior which is observable. Now when I say define, a student can define either orally or in written form. Likewise, he can write a program, that is he is involved in writing a program in C++ as per the requirements of the client. So any behavior which is observable is measurable. You can say definition given by a learner can be compared with the standard definition, and you can say to what extent that definition is correct. Then achievable. These are achievable at the level the learner is and within the time frame which is provided. So when you say at the end of the lesson, the student is able to do that. At the end of the topic, they are able to do that. Or at the end of the course, they are able to demonstrate that competence. And these are outcomes which are realistic. Realistic means they are relevant to the context in which the teaching learning is taking place. So in other words, we can say learning outcomes are statements regarding what a student is able to do at the end of unit of instruction, and they are smart. A good learning outcome has all these five characteristics. They are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time framed. Now, here, when we say a competent person need to possess knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behavior, that means the competencies also fall in three different domains. And this concept of domains of learning outcomes was given way back in 1956 by Benjamin Bloom. And at that particular point of time, we were talking about the education learning objectives rather than the learning outcomes, but objectives were to be stated as intended learning outcomes. And thus, they were classified at that particular point of time in three domains: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. Now, when I say cognitive, as the term indicates, refers to or relate to the acquisition of information. So, how does a person process the information that, and how does that person acquire the information? That is cognitive. All those learning outcomes that relate to acquisition of information or knowledge fall in the domain of cognitive domain. And psychomotor refers to, you can see there are two terms involved here, psyche and motor. Psyche means the mental, and the motor means refers to the muscular coordination. So it is ability to perform a task on the part of an individual. So whatever experiments, whatever exercises you give in the workshop, or you take the students to the field work, or the students are performing certain tasks, those require a skill component which has both cognitive component and the muscular coordination component. Say operating a lathe machine, or operating a computer, or creating a local area network, or electrifying or making electrical connections in the building, and so on. All these are nothing but the tasks which require both cognition as well as the muscular coordination. And all those learning outcomes which relate to acquisition of a skill, that falls in the domain of psychomotor. And affective refers to the learning outcomes that relate to attitude, behavior, soft skills, etc. Now here, first we'll deal with are there different levels in the cognitive domain, or is there only one level? No. As far as cognitive domain is concerned, while the original terminology used, you can see Bloom's, he divided the learning outcomes into 6 different levels. And he used nouns: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. But in 2001, one of his students, along with another author, so Anderson and Crathwall, they have given a new or revised terminology. And they have used not nouns, but they have used verbs. And you can see they also classified learning outcomes into 6 different categories. Learning outcomes at the remembering level, understanding level, applying level, analyzing, evaluating, and creating level. And you can see one difference is, while Bloom used noun as the outcome, they used verbs in the form of processes used to learn that thing. Then the second difference you can observe here is synthesis was kept at number 5 originally, but when Anderson and Crathwall has given, they have taken learning outcomes at creating level as the highest level of learning things. And he says that when we use all this, the knowledge gained through remembering, understanding of concepts, theories, models, or ability to apply the learned knowledge in a new situation, then a person is able to create by synthesizing knowledge acquired, they can create something new. So let's look at that when we talk at remembering. Remembering is the capability to memorize, to recall that information when it is needed. So reproduction of the learned knowledge. So it doesn't require a learner to go beyond memorization, the rote memorization of the things. Now, what happens in any subject? When it comes to the definition of technical terms, the statement of the rules, or you talk in terms of enlisting the various advantages and disadvantages, or a student is required to give the expression of a symbol or full form of the what do you call the full form of the words, like you say land, van. So full form of that, if you are asking the student to write, it doesn't require any understanding, but simply the memorization, the units of measurement. They need to remember those initially. So have a look at when I say the cognitive process you used is simple memorization. Name of machines, symbols of the various hydrogen, oxygen, chlorine, potassium, etc., etc. Values of the constants, they need to be remembered. They need to be memorized. Formula and formula to calculate many number of things depending upon the subject you belong to. Definition of the technical terms involved in the subject, advantages and disadvantages, the classifications, these need to be memorized. And even the principles or the laws which are learned, they also require a person to memorize the thing. So the capability or the cognitive process that is used by the learner is remembering. So the lowest level of learning outcomes is at the level of remembering. So here you can see when we write outcomes at the remembering level, some of the action verbs that are applicable. When you say define, when you say state the Charles law, Joule's law, or a second law of thermodynamics, or you want a person to state or enlist three advantages and three disadvantages of 4G, or state advantages and disadvantages of 4G over 3G, or you want the person to label or identify the parts of lathe machine, or name two types of soil foundation, or give the full form of land, van, and so on, or write the units of voltage, or write the formula, or identify a particular tool from the given objects. So here you can see identify switch from a given object. Then enlist the chemical property, simply enlisting, not explaining, not giving example, but just enlisting. You can see define, state, label, name, give, write, identify, enlist. These are some of the sample verbs which can be used to write learning outcomes at the remembering level. Now, then comes the next higher level. Now, say somebody has to derive relationship between the two concepts, say voltage and current. Somebody has to write the chemical equation, chemical reaction, or need to explain the concept of triangle, force, stack, efficiency, productivity, stress, etc. Then the person need to describe the procedure for writing a program or writing a précis, then interpreting the given graph. Think over what competence would be, or what kind of capability, cognitive processes would be required by the individual? Is it rote memorization or anything else? Over to the audience members. Yes? Any reply? Are you with me? Yes? The audience members. What kind of cognitive process will be used if somebody has to derive the relationship, write the chemical reactions, explain the concepts? Anybody? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Akshay or Dr. Akshay, understanding Dr. Murli. So this is nothing but that means it requires the higher level of cognitive process. It's not simple rote memorization, but it requires understanding so that a person can write in his own words, explain or elaborate on the concepts, give examples, and describe the theories, describe the models, or describe the methods. And the person can also interpret the relationship between two or more than two concepts, also predict a phenomena on the basis of the given data. So you can see when we try to write learning outcomes at the understanding level, they use different set of action verbs. And here you can see explain, differentiate, distinguish, give, interpret, project. These are some of the verbs which are used. Because when I say define software, this is only remembering the definition and reproducing the definition. But when I write explain the concept of software, that means a student needs to explain the concept. Maybe he uses the definition, then explains the definition, elaborate on that, and then maybe he gives one or two examples of the software. Likewise, when you say differentiate, the person who has understood the concept of manual and automatic manufacturing process can only explain the points of differences. Distinguish, again, like differentiate, or who is a person who can give examples of array, a person who has understood the concept of an array. Then a person, if understood the concept of stress and strain, and also understood how graphical representations are made, can only interpret the relationship. And if given data for the last 10 years, a person can project or predict the population of India in 2030, right? So understanding level of learning outcomes require a learner to explain the things, concepts, principles, or theories, models, procedures, materials, etc., in his own words, give examples, and also derive relationship between two or more than two concepts and predict a phenomena. Then you come to see this. When we say that a person has learned a rule, especially, I'm taking just one example. So over to the audience member, when do we say that the learner has learned a particular rule? Yes, the response from the audience side. Apply. Dr. Murli, thank you so much. Damanpreet also correct, Pooja, right? Thank you very much. Okay, Akshay, Seema, what he's able to apply. Unless and until a person is able to apply the learned knowledge, we cannot say that he has learned anything. And especially when it comes to the learning of principles, laws, the application becomes much more important. But a student who graduates from a system needs to apply the learned knowledge in real life or the world of work. So that is the requirement. If he has to succeed, I think there is one hand. So over to the audience member. Any question, sir? Any question? Somebody has raised, Dr. Mangilal. You have a question, please? No, ma'am. Okay, Pooja said no. Okay. If there is no question, then let's go back to the learning outcomes. So when we say that a learner has learned the rules, when he or she is able to apply. So the learning outcomes at the next higher level are at the applying level. Now, what is applying? Now, when you say the person has learned, a simple example I have given, that a person has learned a rule, length into breadth, a rectangle, you get the area, right? But if the person has to apply this in a real life situation, that means he is able to calculate the cost of carpeting a room, leaving 2 foot from each side given the length breadth of the room and cost of carpeting per square. He is applying the rule in a new situation. This starts from the childhood when the student is in school education. Even then it is expected whatever addition, multiplication, subtraction is learning as a part of the arithmetic, he is going to apply that in the world, real life world. A person given a rupee 100 note, a child, maybe 10 years, 12 years, he goes to the market, buy things, he calculates how much he has to pay, he calculates how much balance he'll be able to get. If he's able to do that, that means he's able to apply the learned rule in a new situation. A person who has learned the rule of inertia of movement is able to keep the face in the direction in which the bus is moving. So demonstrate the principle of inertia of movement. Or a person shooting the target under the water is using the principle of refraction. And while we are using the mirror, we are applying the rule of reflection. So here you can see all those things which the person has learned. Maybe he is applying a concept, he is applying a principle, he may be applying, say for example, a given a organization and the employees, you give a context and you say the employees are not motivated to work overtime. So the reasons and can we motivate them? So you're applying the theories of motivation to find a solution to the problem. So applying, right? So you can see calculate, determine, demonstrate, convert, write, or these are some of or you can use it is already written. So let me just not pose this question. Now, say for example, there is a failure of a machine which was functional. Now, this is not writing causes for failure of a machine, but a given machine. That means the machine which is functional has become non-functional and the person is trying to identify the causes of failure. If he is simply repeating what could be the possible causes of failure of machine, he has read that in a book, you have taught him in a class, he simply understood those causes and now he's building the explanation. But when I say identify of a given machine, given is missing here, so given machine, then he has to break down the machine into its constituent parts and then identify the cause for failure. Similarly, locate a fault in the given circuit diagram. So circuit diagram you are presenting, so the person is able to identify the fault or locate the fault. Analyze the reasons for increase in gold prices during the last 6 months. So that means you are giving him exact situation and then the person is trying to identify or analyze that, analyze the reasons for that. So analyze, explain, locate, identify. These are some of the verbs which can be used to write learning outcomes at the analyzing level. Even the system, can be you can identify or analyze the strengths and weaknesses of a given system, or uh, see the analyzing capabilities higher than the remembering, understanding, applying, and analyzing. As we move from one level to other, the lower level is subsumed in the higher level. That means who is a person who can analyze? A person who has the knowledge at the remembering, who has understood those things, has the ability to apply those things in the real life, then the person is able to analyze. Then comes the next higher level ability, that is the cognitive process that is utilized, that is evaluating. Evaluating. Now, here you can see when I say evaluating, what is needed in evaluating things? Evaluating involves, anybody from the audience would like to highlight first, when I say evaluating, what is involved in evaluation? Yes, anyone? I think I'm still getting a signal.
I'm weighing the pros and the
You're
various.
analyzing, you're analyzing something. But what is, okay, Pooja has written outcome. Okay, what is outcome, right? Evaluation means, what does it involve? Justification. Okay. Analysis is involved in evaluation, but evaluation is much more than analysis. Yes. When you go to the market, you want to buy, say, mobile for yourself. What do? Outcome of understanding, applying. No. Let's just answer this question. When you go to the market, you want to buy.
I'm weighing the pros and the cons.
You weigh the pros and cons of different things. Okay. Then what do? You make a judgment regarding determining the worth
Have
of
we taken
something.
decision
And
which
okay, you
buy,
build the
which is value for
justification.
money?
Okay, fine. And finally, you take a decision. So, judgment or determining the worth of that thing is involved in evaluation. And finally, it is followed by a decision. So, it involves the lower level capabilities, which also include analysis, right? Dr. Mangilal, do you have a question? Because I am seeing has raised a hand and this is open queue. Anybody? Yeah, sir, do you have a question? No. Doesn't speak, but okay, let's go back. So when we say the learning outcomes at the evaluating level, that means in any discipline, there are a number of materials, there are number of theories, there are number of principles which are applicable in a given situation, or there are different models that can be applied, or say computer science, there are different languages, and you can write a program in different languages depending upon the need of the client. But which particular language would be more efficient, more effective, and which language would serve your purpose, that you need to take a decision. So you need to determine the worth of the material, the technique, the principle, the model, the theory, so that you can achieve your purpose, right? Somebody said, Pooja said outcome. So that means you are able to achieve your purpose. And here it involves, so the student is able to judge the appropriateness of circular iron stairs for a given residential building, or the person is able to evaluate, you can use the verb evaluate the effectiveness of communication system in a given organization, or determine the appropriateness of performance appraisal policy for teachers, or judge the, I think these are not from the engineering field, maybe I have missed that, but you can see here, select an appropriate security tool for ensuring security of data, information of a given company. So these learning outcomes require a learner to select something or to determine efficiency, effectiveness, suitability, or adequacy of the things in a given situation. So you see, judge, evaluate, determine, select. These are some of the words. You can use evaluate itself to write learning outcome at the evaluating level. And highest level of learning is referred to as where we use the cognitive process called creating. That is you are synthesizing the knowledge acquired and creating something new. So designing a carburetor for a given vehicle, or design a component of a given machine, design an organizational structure for achieving specified. So design is one, create a local area network, or write a program in C++ as per the client requirement. Not any program in C++, that will be just repeating a process. But if you have to meet the client requirements, you have to create a program. Then formulate professional development policy, or you can also say design design a smart city, or maybe formulate a policy for converting Chandigarh to be a smart city. So you can design, write, create, formulate, plan. All these verbs can be used to write learning outcomes at the creating level. So friends, I have a small Google form, and whatever I have dealt in till now, there are few questions, and these are examples of the learning outcomes. You have to simply classify those. So I'm putting this link in the chat box, and I'll request all of you to kindly copy, and here kindly go to this. This is your chat box. So I'm putting this post. Please click on the link and let me know whether you are able to access the Google form. Yes, anybody, any member, click on the link and please let me know, are you able to access the Google form? Yes, anyone? क्या हो गया जी, आया नहीं है आपके पास? Yes, any audience member, please let me know.
Yes, madam. We can getting, madam.
Okay, so kindly take the questions. Let me also open up this. I think this is the one. Have you got this? No. आपको मिला कौन से वाला? मुझे एक मिनट कहीं रिपीट तो नहीं हो गया?
Yes, ma'am. We've received this only, and we've gone through it and answered it and submitted it.
Just a minute. Let me. Okay, 56 responses are already there. Okay, I made a mistake. इसको delete कर सकते हैं? Can I delete these? Not accepting responses, na, for the time
Yeah,
being.
you just close the accepting responses part, ma'am.
That is done, but delete all responses. Okay, fine. So I'll okay. So I'll know how many of you have now accepting responses. Okay, these are the questions now. Fine, my mistake. So about 7 to 8 minutes are required to do this activity. Kindly take the question, pay attention to the action verb which has been used, and you will be able to answer these questions.
Ma'am, it's not taking the response now because we are allowed to submit it only once as per whatever
Not
you have
accepting?
incorporated in the form. Yeah, it's
नहीं
not
नहीं
accepting.
no
A
no
second
it will
time,
accept. वेटिंग फॉर रिस्पॉन्सेस आप करके देखिए, दोबारा से करिए, सबमिशन दोबारा कर दीजिए. You have completed all. Let me also take a नहीं लेना चाहिए, क्यों नहीं? मैम नहीं हो रहा सबमिशन. Anybody who can let me know whether you're accepting or not accepting? जी मैम.
Ma'am, it says you have already submitted the response.
It is not accepting.
It says you have already responded to the form.
It is said. Okay. So maybe you have not responded, but accepting responses. Let me do one. What I can do is I can just paste a new link to your chat box. You can take the responses there. So make this quiz. Question कहाँ आ रहे हैं? Send कहाँ गया अब? Okay, send. Okay. So what I do is I just put a new link in your chat box. You can just click on. कहाँ गया? Oh, I think I'm wasting my time and yours. Just give me 1 minute. जी अभी करके देखिए आप. Sorry for this inconvenience, but if you can take up. Anybody who can let me know? Is it now accessible? Ji, is it now accessible or not?
It is, ma'am.
It is. Okay.
It is, ma'am.
Okay, अभी आप करके देखिए. Maybe the link was the previous one and we omitted the responses, so it was not accepting. I should have made a copy of this. Ji. हाँ जी, अभी आ गया. Thank you so much and sorry for the inconvenience. So received 5 responses. So maybe it is already 25 past 3. So you have another 5 minutes to go. So 9 people have already submitted. Simply put a tick mark on the level of the classification, whether this learning outcome is at remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, or creating level. So already got 13, 14, good. 16, okay. 17. Okay. It's simply checking our own understanding of the levels of learning outcome. So 20 responses, 21. Okay. 4 minutes left. We are left with an additional 2 minutes. Okay, 35 people have already responded. Those who are at the learning center and have a joint kind of display, maybe they are not able to take up the quiz, so they can compare the responses. You can simply write down, if you can see on the screen the quiz, you can write down the responses and compare with when we try to discuss these. So 38 responses I've got by now. So 1 minute left. It is already 3:29. Okay, so we have got 40 responses by now. It is already time. Chalo, let's go to the responses and quickly see where do we stand. Now, design an engine cannot be at the remembering level, but somebody has 7.3% of the people have said it is at the remembering. No, not at all. It is much more than that. If you take a given specification, maybe the people have confused it with applying and then creating. But 42% have already said creating. But in the last session, we had a discussion on this, and people said if you write design an engine of given specification, so you are already specifying. So it is nothing more than the application. But if you say design an engine for a given sports utility vehicle without specifying giving the specification, that may require some originality and there may be some variations from one learner to another. So I accept both applying and creating. Creating, if you take it, it is something novelty, originality is there. But if it is simply designing an engine of a given specification and no originality is there, then it is at the applying level. Then develop a software to meet the customer's need is correct. 48 percent of you are correct when you say it is because first the person has to identify the customer's needs, and then based upon those customer needs, a person has to develop a software. Then judge the suitability of MOOC. So it is at the evaluating level. I'm happy 50% of you have rightly said. So those who have said analyzing, I said even if you are evaluating, it involves a component of analysis. So higher level learning outcome includes the lower levels of cognitive processes. So higher level is because somebody has to judge the suitability, and you have to say whether it is suitable or not. So once this decision is made, it is more than analysis, simple analysis. It is judging the suitability, determining the worth, and taking a decision. Then apply the reinforcement, and I'm happy that a verb was there, apply. So 56% of you could say that it is application of the theory of motivation. Then classify. Classify is rightly, again 47% of you are correct. You can classify shapes if you have understood the characteristics of shape, whether it is a triangle, circle, or a rectangle, or a rhombus, and so on. So understanding is, this is at the understanding level. Define the term reinforcement is, again 47% of you are correct when you say it is at the remembering level, because it is only rote memorization on the part of the learner. Likewise, define shear force, again 47% of persons have said that it is at the remembering level. Then interpret the graph. Interpret the graph means you have understood the concept of those two concepts and how to draw a graph, and thereby you are able to interpret the graph. So it is at the understanding level. It involves little component of analysis, as you have said, but it is not at the analysis level. Then okay, this was no question was there, so hardly any question. I think question was not there. So thank you so much for taking up, and those who could not respond must reflect back and find out where they went wrong. Now, if you pay attention to, before I switch over to psychomotor and the affective domain, let me just go to the program outcomes once. And you can see that when these program outcomes are there, these are here when you see the first one, it is apply the knowledge. So it is applying the knowledge. Problem analysis, when you say problem analysis, identify, formulate, analyze complex. That means you identify the variables that affect the problem and you select the relevant ones and so on. So this is analyze, the highest level of capability which has been included here. So cognitive process analysis, analyzing. Then design and development of solution. Now here, this is at the creating level, kind of a program outcome. Then conduct investigations of complex problem. Now research-based knowledge and research methods, design of experiments. So again, it is application. And then if you go for taking up a problem and finding a solution, this is creating a solution. Then modern tool usage. That means create. You are creating something new. So this is the highest level of capability that is included here. Now these 5 program outcomes pertain to the cognitive domain. But if you go further, then you will find that many things. Now engineer and society is with, again, for the affective domain. The person who has the right kind or favorable attitude would be able to do that. So first 5 are related to the cognitive domain. Now let's go back to the psychomotor domain. It's simple when we go to the psychomotor domain. Just giving you one example we can take up here, here. Okay, so psychomotor domain, I said, involves cognition of things. That means cognitive domain is always involved. If I have to operate a lathe machine, I must have the knowledge about the lathe, the various parts of the lathe, the function they perform, the various processes which can be done on the lathe machine, and the method of doing that process. And then I must be aware of the safety precautions which need to be taken, and so on, the kind of material that can be used, and so on. So all theoretical base I must have before I am allowed to operate a lathe machine. So that is a cognitive component. Then when we are performing a task, if it is a simple task, we can perform on our own. It doesn't involve any risks. Then the learner can be allowed to perform the task on his own. There may be trial and error learning taking place in the learner. But if it is a complex thing, complex skill, and there is a lot of risk involved in it, we cannot simply allow a novice to do the task. And what happens then? Somebody who's an expert first demonstrate those things, how to operate, right? And what a novice is doing is only copying that expert. अब देखिए, I'm just taking an example of learning driving a car, right? If I have to drive a car, the master trainer, the skilled person, the driver, he sits, he operates the car, he asks me to observe, and then he give me some control, but primarily he's managing. I'm just imitating, trying to copy what he has been doing. In this process comes the next stage, the manipulation. A stage comes in when the novice is asked by the expert to handle the things on his own. And what happened? The number of errors, mistakes committed by the novice. So manipulation is a stage when the learner is allowed to handle the machinery, equipment, tools on his own, but the error or the mistake rate is high. With practice, accuracy creeps in. So this is the next stage in skill learning, the precision comes in. And but the person can perform the task, the various acts with precision, but coordination is still missing. For example, when you are a new learner, then and you are trying to drive a car, and somebody switches on the FM, you say, please stop it, close it. It distracts me. Okay? The person starts talking to you. You say, don't disturb me. Let me focus on the driving. You're not able to coordinate the various acts because of the distraction caused by the others. So gradually, as you go on practicing, there comes in stage where the precision is high and coordination is there. So articulation is the stage where the person can perform the task with coordination and accuracy. And the highest level of skill learning is when you are able to make it a second habit and you are able to modify, adapt the skill. Now, for example, when I was talking, say you have the master of how mobiles are assembled, what functions are performed, what are the various parts and so on. You have all the nitty-gritty of the mobile phone. Now you are the person who can add a new feature to the mobile phone. You are the person who can reduce the size of this, you can make it much lighter in weight, but provide me more feature, because you have the ability to modify it, to adapt it to the requirements of the context. See, somebody who has done, and earlier when it came into being, only functions were sending and receiving messages. But now what you can do is the whole business you can do through your mobile phone. So any skill learning passes through 5 different stages: imitation, manipulation, precision, articulation, and naturalization. And when we perform a skill, it is we are making use of our cognitive domain, and it is also accompanied by some of our attitudes and behavior. Now, a person who observes safety rules has the right kind of or favorable attitude towards safety. A person who has the ability to work in teams, and when any skill work is to be done in team, he is able to work in team. So ability to work in team is there. You need to communicate to your team members. So communication may be another element which is also exhibited by the learner. So psychomotor domain has all the 3: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective component. Now here you can see I've taken one simple example: verify Ohm's law. This is what the student normally do in their first year when they go to the lab. And verify Ohm's law is a psychomotor learning outcome in the psychomotor. So it is simply giving the objective, the outcome, what a student has to do in the lab. Verify Ohm's law. That means a student will be able to verify or is able to verify Ohm's law. And what I've done is I've broken down the task into its constituent parts. So verify Ohm's law would require a person to draw the circuit diagram, arrange the apparatus as per then clean the ends of connecting wires with sandpaper, make them shiny, make the connections as per the circuit diagram, and so on. Then determine the zero error and least count of the ammeter, voltmeter, record them, adjust the rheostat to pass a low current. And these are the steps which can be again repeated. Maybe 3 observations or 5 observations or 10 observations are required on the part of the learner. So what a skill learning, when you write the outcome of any experiment, exercise, or field work, this is nothing but you are writing a learning outcome in the psychomotor domain. Or when you say design a tool, design would require a person to perform a task in the lab or the design, not designing, but creating or manufacturing a tool that would require. Design would not require. Fine. So here is another example of Joule's law, verify Joule's law, or you can say connect the computer in local area network. Now, this is what is required to be done at the client end, then what is to be done at the administrator end. And if you state those things starting with an action verb, these are nothing but all learning outcome. All tasks are to be performed in the same order by the learner. So these are learning outcomes in the psychomotor domain. I hope it is clear. This is what I've taken from Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University. And this domain is rather more important, effective. All studies, irrespective whether they are India Skill Report at the national level, or this is Manpower Research Group Talent Shortage Studies taken at the international level, they all talk of that our students do not possess the right kind of attitude, behavior, and primarily the soft skill they are lacking. And when we talk in terms of learning outcomes, we are concerned with attitudes, values, maybe in terms of your attendance, punctuality, regularity, observance of safety rules, professional ethics and responsibilities, sustainability issues, we are talking about the safety of our clients, customers, etc. These are what? These are nothing but the related to learning outcomes in the affective domain. Just giving a very simple layman's explanation for this, that uh, eh, how do we come out with the value? Very simple explanation. We keep on receiving do's and don'ts. Now, for example, when we were children, we were given do's and don'ts. Say, always speak truth, be honest, be punctual, go to the bed early, don't talk to stranger, do's and don'ts. Don't lie, don't call. What is this? All do's and don'ts. What we have been doing, we have been simply receiving this information from elders, and a stage came when we started responding, questioning some of the do's and don'ts. Why should I go to the bed early? Why shouldn't I talk to the stranger? Why shouldn't I be late back home, and so on and so forth? This is what is happening in your students when they come to the lab or the workshop, and you start giving them do's and don'ts of your discipline and the safety and so on. So receiving is the initial, responding, they start posing question. Why should it be done like this? Why can't it be adjusted like this? Why can't we switch on a machine directly before showing, without showing the circuit diagram to the teacher, and so on? Valuing. A third stage comes where we start valuing, that is attaching worth to certain things. Like we value money, we value time, we value relationship, we value honesty, we value cooperation, and so many things, right? Each one of us attaches value to numerous things in life. But then there may be a situation where we have to choose from the value in a given situation. For example, going by the car, met with an accident. Now, if I speak truth, the driver goes to the jail. If I lie, I can save the driver. Now, it will depend whether I value relationship more or I value honesty more. That will determine my action in the given situation. That means prioritization. So organization refers to prioritization. How do you prioritize? Which is more important than the other one? So that is, each one of us has given priority to the things we value in life. And if we have to choose, then it is based on priority. Then characterization by value set means you personify that value, as non-violence, Mahatma Gandhi, as social work by Mother Teresa, and so on. But there are a number of other people who are there, but these are two known for, non-violence and the social work. So this is one simple example I am giving. It is not everything. It is not technically that I am explaining these things, but then each one of us as a teacher would look for favorable attitude towards the course, attitude towards the teacher, attitude towards the peer members, attitude towards practical work, project work, field work, so on. You can go on expanding the list. I'm simply writing, we expect our learner to obey the rules. Rules of classroom, rules of lab, rules of examination, rules for submitting assignments, rules for kitne rules hai sab. Then observe safety precautions in the labs and the workshops and in the field. Attend classes, regularity and punctuality. That is very important. Then cooperate with others. Communicate in large group. This is one, I've just taken one. You can think of, we expect that our students would communicate in small groups, communicate one-to-one, communicate a pleasant message, communicate an unpleasant message, communicate on phone, communicate in writing, etc., etc. You can think of so many learning outcomes. Then exhibit honesty or demonstrate honesty. respect others, maintain cordial relations, work in teams, and demonstrate or exhibit team spirit, or you can say, when you say cooperate with others, it's also part of the teamwork. So there are a number of things, and it is always said attitude determines your altitude. So this is one of the quotes. It's true. You may have the knowledge, you may have the skill, but if you don't have the right favorable attitude, then it is of no use. So this is where I think when we look to the program outcome, just go back to that slide. Let me, okay. Just when we look at, you can see how much importance has been given to the effective component. So program outcomes. So 5, I said, directly goes to the cognitive domain. Then you can see here the engineer and the society. Apply reasoning informed by the contextual knowledge. So the person is having a contextual knowledge, that means attitude to understand the context. Environment and sustainability, again, has something to do with your attitudes and behavior. Ethics, primarily related to professional ethics and yeah, professional ethics and responsibilities, again, is affective domain. Individual and teamwork, again, falls in affective domain. Communication effectiveness, again, goes to your affective domain. Then project management, again taken as a part of your entrepreneurial ventures and so on. Then comes your lifelong learning, again falls in the affective domain as the attitude and behavior. So see, learning outcomes, as a teacher, we get normally program outcomes, course outcomes, but unless and until we specify the learning outcomes at the topic level, lesson level, and then while assessing student performance, we'll be making use of these learning outcomes, which I'll be touching upon tomorrow when we deal with how to set a good quality question paper. Because as teachers, we are paper setters for our class tests, maybe 3 class tests, which is a common practice in many of the institutions. And then we are also paper setters for end semester test or the annual test, as the system may be. So one has to, because the system which is in vogue has number of drawbacks, which I'll be dealing tomorrow. So here I end with this. If any one of my colleagues has a question or would like to add anything, you are welcome. G, over to the audience members. Anything you would like to add, or is there any question? There is no question? Okay, people have started leaving the meeting, no issue, because we are also 5 minutes left. So anything you would like to add?
Yes, ma'am. I have a question, ma'am.
Dr. Seema, over to you.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, what we've often noticed is that many of these learning outcomes are often prescriptive in nature. You know, it's always like we're prescribing that, okay, this is the required outcome of a particular subject, of a particular course. So a lot of times, you know, there's this debate that many of these learning outcomes are either over prescribed or under prescribed. So does it leave any room for any creativity or imagination of the students? You know, how can we make our learning outcomes interesting in the sense that the students would willingly want to, you know, engage with them and maybe they'll derive their joy out of reading those learning outcomes, and of course then
No.
would want to embark on these
Okay.
subjects,
Uh,
with that kind of zeal and interest with which
okay.
they've been
Okay.
devised.
The question is very relevant to the context where we say they are not able to achieve and there are reasons beyond. How do you specify is not the reason for students not involved in it? It is the curricular experiences which we design and provide to our learners that will determine whether they do a task with joy, with interest, with intrinsic motivation, or so on. Now, for example, now when I say the apply the learned knowledge in finding solution to the problem, this is one of the learning outcomes, right? Now, the question arises, if I am picking up problems which require they have a simple one right answer, and they have to simply apply the learned knowledge or learned formula to find a solution, then there may be chances that after doing 5 or 6 or 10, they become bored or they're not motivated to do that. Now the question arises, do I design my question in such a manner that it gives a leverage to the learner to give an original response? That means I am not restricting myself to a problem which has one right answer, but which can have multiple right answers. When I am giving a problem, is it not from a book where the direct answer is available, where the student goes to the book, cut, copy and paste, or go to the internet, cut, copy and paste? Can I think of a journal article where the student is made to study that journal article and then respond to the questions which I have given? There may be originality in that. So how do I provide the experience and how do I design those tasks, assignments, or problems or problem? Now, for example, now all the time when we are sitting in the class, we all know that our students are carrying the gadgets, the mobile phones. And most of the time they are glued to the mobile phone. Maybe they are only pretending to be in the class and not can I integrate that technology in my classroom so that it is I am utilizing their potential, utilizing their what they are interested in, and then I am enabling them to achieve the specified learning outcomes. What you have said is learning outcomes, because they need to be specified, they'll be
Yes.
prescriptive, they'll be
Yes.
prescriptive. You cannot go beyond those. But
Yeah.
how can you motivate your learners to achieve those? So the role of the teacher is simply to create conditions that
Right.
whereby the students are facilitated to achieve those. Now, sitting in the classroom, maybe it becomes boring, but I take my students to the community, ask them to interact with the community, identify their problems. Now, this is what you have all been doing these days, taking your students to the community, collecting the data, collating the data, then highlighting the problems faced by the community, then allotting them the projects based upon to find solution, or going to the hackathon AICT has started and you have 1,000 problems of work organization where you have real life problems before the students, make them select those problems and work on those rather than teaching things which are already available in the book. If you can exemplify, because teacher is what we maybe you agree or you don't agree with me, what we have been doing is whatever is available in book, that is being repeated in the class. And many times the teachers are taking PPTs from the slides.net. Internet has made it easy for us. Open educational resources are there. Publishers are also giving us the PowerPoints already prepared by them, and then we are utilizing those. What ingenuity I'm showing in that? What is my originality and creativity? I can't teach by somebody's PPTs, but maybe people just take the PPTs, don't elaborate, just read those PPTs. that will not help. So curricular experiences we provide to the learner, those are having much more impact upon the learner rather than these specified learning outcomes. So we need to focus on those. G, Dr. Seema. Dr. Seema, are you
Thank you
with
so
me?
much. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I'm there with you, ma'am. I'm so sorry. I was trying to get back to the navigation.
Because
Thank you so much for such a wonderful response, ma'am. I think you've
thank
said
you.
it all. I think, there's this wonderful quotation that we've read in the past, that an average teacher, a mediocre teacher tells, and a great teacher is generally the one who inspires, and demonstrates. So I think that's so beautifully expressed by you.
Thank you
And
very much.
thank you
So
so
any
much.
other question? If there is, maybe we are exceeded the time, there's another session. So Dr. Sunil might be waiting. So thank you very much, friends. See you tomorrow at the same time, 2:30 for the next session. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, ma'am, for a
My
wonderful session.
pleasure.